Well, joining us now from the Israeli parliament in Jerusalem are lawmakers Mossi from the opposition Meretz party and Sharren Haskel of the ruling Likud party. And Sharren, could you explain to our viewers, good evening, could you explain to our viewers why now Prime Minister Netanyahu says the defense minister's post is so critical, only he can take it over, but 2 years ago he removed from that post a former chief of staff and put in there Avigdor Lieberman, a man who had no senior security experience.
Okay, that's not what the Prime Minister said. What he said is that he's got a strategy, he's got a plan. He's the person, the most responsible, the most reliable, and the most experienced person that is capable of managing and pushing or sort of directing this conflict between Israel and between Hamas. And he's actually right. He is the most experienced one. He is the most reliable one. And he's the only a person who was capable to put all political ego and any other consideration on the side and think on what's best for the state of Israel and what's best for our people. I was really glad to hear Naftali Bennett agreeing with that this morning. Naftali Bennett as well. I was actually quite proud to hear him putting all of his politics, his ego, demanding for different kind of position on the side, and straightening up, saying that we're going to do together what's best for the state of Israel, what's best for its security, and we're going to continue to work together.
Well, Mossi, so I want to ask you, are all these politicians, whether it is right-wing education minister Naftali Bennett or Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, are they all putting politics and ego aside for the good of the country?
No, they don't. They don't put politics aside. First, I want to say about the education minister. This is a bad day for the education in Israel. That he stays in his position, in his ministry, in his office. But he tried actually to take, in a violent way, the position of the defense minister, and thanks to Prime Minister Netanyahu, I don't believe that I'm saying that he didn't let him do that. Again, I want to thank the Prime Minister Netanyahu that he did not go with the willing of the right wing to go to kill people in Gaza, to go to a war in Gaza. But on the other hand, I listened to Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday very carefully, and actually I've heard him saying that we are in a complicated security situation. We are in a problematic time. And I ask myself, Netanyahu went to earlier elections 4 years ago, 3 and a few months ago. He went to earlier elections, and because he said the security situation is very good, and now the security situation is not very good, to say the least. Who is responsible for that? Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Sharren, I want you to react to that and also to explain. You said before that Netanyahu is putting his ego, his politics aside, that he's the only person who can take over the defense minister role. If this is in fact all about the country, all about security, and the security situation is that dire, why would you not want to appoint a full-time defense minister?
So he's not the only one, and he did say as well that he would have trusted Naftali Bennett as well in this position, and he has in mind many more names that can fulfill this position as well. But right now we are at a critical time. I mean, our enemy straight on the border, Hamas, is not a friend to us. They have declared that no matter what, they are going to try to eliminate the state of Israel.
So, Sharren,
we're
at that critical time,
a very complex front at the moment.
So at that critical time that you described, why not appoint a full-time defense minister to be in charge of all those challenges that Israel faces that you described?
Well, it's not out of the ordinary that happened. It happened with many prime ministers in the past, that they've held the position of the prime minister and the position of the Ministry of Defense. The prime minister right now is know exactly what is happening there. Coming in this kind of sensitive time, not critical, but very sensitive time, when we're probably just in front of, we might be into another confrontation with Hamas as well. This is not the right time to switch. Also, we need to get the acceptance of our entire coalition friends and parties who are together with us. This is our partners in the coalition. This is not just the decision of the prime minister who to put on the seat of the security defense minister. And so right now the prime minister is in discussions with them as well. He's not ruling out that maybe in the future as well Naftali Bennett will fulfill this position. But right now he's absolutely right. We are at a sensitive time. He is the most reliable, the most experienced person to manage it at the moment. And once everything calms down, then maybe we can discuss it.
Mossi, if the polls are accurate, then the Israeli public, a majority of the Israeli public, is accepting the argument that Sharren is making. Why does the opposition want to go to elections when the polls show that Benjamin Netanyahu would likely return to office?
I think this is the role of opposition to call for earlier elections, but I looked at the polls. The polls actually say that majority of the Israelis think that we should go to earlier elections. I do agree that according to the polls, there is a lot of support in the right wing and in the prime minister policy. This is very clear. Nations always, in all the history of the world, supported wars. And while the right wing is calling to war, the majority support them. It's very clear. It was like that everywhere, in every state. There is nothing that we can do against that. War is something that is very popular among Israelis and among other nations during war. And unfortunately, we have seen that last week. Even the ministers who were in the cabinet and actually supported the ceasefire, they couldn't even say that because war is so popular here.
But in times of war and relative peace, because everything in Israel is relative, the left wing still hasn't managed to get out of the shadow of the right wing for decades. How do you explain that there is no clear person, no clear man or woman that is ready to challenge Netanyahu in elections from the left?
Okay, this is a good question. I think that when we talk about the left wing and right wing in Israel, we should look what happens in Europe, for example, that in many ways we are pretty similar to them. Social democratic and left parties are now weak almost in all the states, including, by the way, US, but of course in Europe. Not all the states, but most of them, because the easiest thing is to bring this hatred in Europe to the refugees, to the asylum seekers, here to the Palestinians, and to get votes out of it. This is the easiest thing to do. And I do think that the left wing in Israel that did a mistake in the last decade or two, focusing on social issues that are not popular in Israel, instead of stand up and explain why we want to end the occupation as a moral thing to Israel and as a kind of a tool that can improve our security.
Sharren, I don't think you really answered the point raised.
Just for a second on what Mossi have said before, because it's just really, really disturbing. Israelis do not like war. Israelis and the culture in Israel have been trying to avoid war constantly, every single time. Every operation, every war we've been to is only to defend our people and to defend our country. We've never been aggressive trying to attack anyone. War is not something popular in Israel. We value life. We value the life of our soldiers.
Sharren,
and
we
this
take
will only come at a last solution for us.
Sharren, we take your point, but I just want to ask you, your party, the Likud, has been in power nearly a decade. If we are at a critical stage now, if Israel is at a critical stage with Hamas now, isn't that a failure of your party over the past decade?
Sorry, could you repeat this question? I couldn't get it.
Your party has been in power for nearly 10 years. Has it...
For a decade.
For a decade. Isn't its Gaza policy been a failure?
Absolutely not. I mean, Israel is a country where it's got many challenges that no other country needs to face. I mean, we've got on our northern border Hezbollah. It's a terrorist organization run by Iran with more than 100,000 rockets. Have we failed because we have these enemies? Absolutely not. We need to find ways on how to deal with them, how to fight them. That was the same case in Syria. This is the same case with Hamas.
All right.
Hamas is an enemy of Israel. The fact that it's there, this is not a failed policy or failed situation of our government. This is an enemy that we need to find a way to fight.
The only way
Sharren, is either to kick them
Mossi...
out towards Egypt, or either to maintain a deterrence, a strong deterrence, that they will not dare to attack Israel again.